Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Sarah Bai. I am the Director of Programming at the Museum of Contemporary Art, Denver, and I'm here today to introduce Dreaming Denver, Mathias Svalina, in conversation with Carolina Ebeid. We are thrilled to bring you, our viewers, this lunchtime program, and we are so glad you can tune in. I'm going to introduce both of our guests and cede the floor for their conversation, and if time allows, we'll take a few questions from the chat at the end of the program. If you'd like to comment, you'll have to log in, which is easier from a computer or a tablet than it is from a TV. And I'll go on to say that all of MCA Denver's programs this summer are offered online for free. Of course, it takes a lot to produce our programming. If you're so inclined, and if you have the means, please consider making a donation at mcadenver.org/support. We suggest a $10 per person donation, which is what we would ordinarily charge for tickets, but of course, any amount helps. Once again, the link is mcadenver.org/support, which we are sharing right now at the bottom of your screen. Now I'd like to introduce our guest today. Mathias Svalina is an artist and writer who may be best known for his Dream Delivery Service, a project that he has run since 2014. He is the author of 7 books, most recently America at Play and The Depression, which is a collaboration with the photographer John Pack, which is published by the Civil Coping Mechanisms. His work has been widely published in literary journals and anthologies, and it's been translated into numerous languages. This summer, MCA Denver commissioned Mathias to create a new work, which he titled Dreaming Denver. The work consists of 30 dreams at 30 locations throughout Denver, and to experience the project, you go to the location, you call in a phone number, and you key in the code associated with that dream. And you can hear Mathias telling you a dream about the location. It's truly a work that's born of the pandemic, but it's one that we hope can be enjoyed at any time. And he's joined today by Carolina Ebeid. Carolina is a multimedia poet. Her first book, You Ask Me to Talk About the Interior, was selected as one of the 10 best debuts of 2016 by poets and writers, and her work has been supported by the Stadler Center for Poetry at Bucknell University, Breadloaf, Canto Mundo, the NEA, as well as a residency fellowship from the Lenin Foundation. She is on faculty at Mile High MFA at Regis University, the bilingual MFA at the University of Texas, El Paso, and Lighthouse Writers Workshop in Denver. A longtime editor, she currently edits poetry at the Rumpus, as well as the multimedia zine Visual Binary. Please welcome Carolina and Mathias.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Mathias.
Hello.
Before we begin our conversation, I just wanted to say that to everyone that Mathias is in Leadville, Colorado, which happens to be the highest incorporated city in the United States. And so it brings with it a bit of technical trouble. There might be a little bit of a lag, and if there is a significant lag, Mathias will just close down his video feed and feature a lovely picture.
Hopefully lovely. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, MCA, for having us here. And thank you, Carolina, for chatting.
Very happy to be here virtually with you. So I have lots of questions, but the first one I think that everybody wants to know is what the origin story is for this dream writing that you've been making since 2014.
So yeah, I started the Dream Delivery Service in Denver in 2014. And one way of telling the story is just that I was broke, and I realized my only skill set was writing weird things for people. And I devised this Dream Delivery Service kind of as a joke, as where I could write as many of these little poems, these little dream stories for people possible, and hopefully also pay my rent for the summer. But another version of it is that this is sort of the culmination of the kinds of writing I've been doing my whole writing career. My first book was a series of surrealist creation myths, and my second book was a series of absurdist plans, and then surrealist instructions for children's games that just came out this past year, and a book of surrealist failed love poems where like a shoe falls in love with a waffle iron and they try to make it work, and of course it doesn't work. So this idea of like the surrealism has been behind what I've been doing for the last in general. And then kind of holding on to them and editing them and making them, condensing them into a book. The Dream Delivery Service is a way to sort of every day for a month at a time try to exhaust myself of all possible strange ideas, and every day try to write as many surrealist narratives as I can. And I typically write between 25 and 45 a day, and send them out into the world, forget about them, and then the next morning wake up and start all over again.
Yeah, it does. It seems like an exhaustion. It seems like the process itself of writing them, and then not only writing them, but delivering them on your bike to the local residents, at least. That seems to be in and of itself some kind of performance in endurance and creativity, productivity. So your relationship to your bike is somewhat part of this, isn't it?
It really is. I sort of, as this thing that started as a joke has become my whole life, it's sort of been a way for me to put forward the two things that make me purely happy in the world, which is writing, the act of writing, being at the table, putting together words, putting together ideas, like using that improvisatory moment makes me purely happy. And the other thing that makes me happy is just long distance biking, being alone on a bike for long periods of time. So with the Dream Delivery Service on a personal level, I need to put the two things at the front of my life and see how everything else falls into place, which sometimes is very nicely and sometimes pretty awful. But I guess that's the same for anybody's life.
There's something really quite beautiful about, I've subscribed to the Dream Delivery Service, and for those who may not know it, it is a service. You pay a certain amount, and then each day Mathias will write a specific and tailored to you dream, and then slip it under your door in the wee hours of the morning in this little beautiful pink envelopes. And so 30 or 31 will come, one each day. And I mean, I always, whenever I open it, I feel like reliving some sort of 19th century reality. Like I'm Emily Dickinson. And she says, a letter seems to me like immortality. It is the mind alone without corporeal friend. And yet I love that it is this physical object of the letter, that you yourself have touched it in making it, in stuffing the envelope, in slipping it and delivering it under the door. And I'm wondering, I guess, I know that you're someone who makes a lot of books and makes these literary objects. And is the delivery service like a book in any way? Do you think of it as this book that's disseminated all over the city you're in?
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, to my mind, because I came up as a poet, and most of what I did in my sort of formative training or whatever was focused on books and making books. I still sort of think of everything that way. So in my mind, I'm writing a book collaboratively with that subscriber over the course of a month. And much like with all writing, and especially with all poetry, there's a lot of openness to what I write. So all the dreams written in second person, they begin with, you are in an abandoned church, and there's a herd of hippos in the front of the church. You have to walk across the hippos in order to get to the cabinet where you've left your aspirin, because you have to take your aspirin out. You know, this sort of thing of like this unfolding of iconic imagery, a balance between the familiar and the strange. And to me, it's all about trying to create a intimacy that is only there. So with books, we have this great technology of intimacy. You know, you open the book, you are, with a physical book at least, you know, you're included by it. You're sort of held by the book as you are holding the book, you know, and all of the touch of paper, the scent of paper, all these things that make books so sort of intoxicating. That's great technology. I also think that, you know, internet publishing is great technology for very different reasons, for reasons of access, for reasons of being able to connect on a much broader scale than a book, which in literary and picture world might have fewer than 1,000 copies in print. And then with the dream delivery service and with the zines that I do and the handmade chapbooks that my press Octopus Books used to do, I feel like it's sort of a balancing with the wide access of digital publishing to keep a level of intimacy to these literary objects as well. And I think with the dream delivery service, the fact that I'm connecting with that subscriber and that reader at their door or at their mailbox every day for a month, I'm not sure what, but it gives a different sort of sense of how meaning is made than a book that is mass produced, has gone to a warehouse and then gone to a store or something and then been delivered, and then you have the whole thing in your hands. Something different happens, and I'm not sure what it is. I'm not sure I ever want to know what it is or be able to fully identify it. And I think that creating that intimacy was one of the interesting things with the Dreaming Denver project too, because that sense of holding a little fragile piece of paper, knowing that, you know, I sometimes double up the dreams depending on how many I can write every day, but some of them, everybody gets some dreams that are just for them over the course of a month of subscribing. So it was interesting to try to think about how to translate that sense of intimacy into something that is digital through the phone, that is sort of more of a mass project.
Yeah. I've been thinking about the difference between receiving an individual dream and because of our friendship, they can often be, there are parts of me in it that I recognize that, of course, you know, and that's such a cool experience. And with Dreaming Denver, well, it is quite different because we are in this COVID age, and they're such public places, and the dreams feel private. And there's something about walking through these often very familiar places, because I live near downtown. So I've for the past few years, I've had to walk through those locations. I'm never still in any of them. I'm never just like standing in the place where I should be accessing these dreams. And yet your dreams this whole project, it finds an intimacy there. It kind of just uncovers, I think you used that word, it uncovers an intimate space that is there in the city, even though people are walking, bustling through bikes, street traffic, and yet the dreams somehow make you make one stand still. It's like carving out of space there, this other dimension that I had no idea existed, and being asked, here, step in and listen to this.
Which, I mean, I feel like that's at the heart of the lyric in poetry too. You know, that sense of what poetry often asks us to do, or at least lyric-minded poetry, is to stop in one way or another. You know, and to focus in on the workings of somebody else's mind, or the ability for language to make our mind make meaning we couldn't have had before. You know, in that sense.
Right.
And tablet froze when I said the word pause, which
Yeah,
felt
you're
really
a
ghostly.
magician you are.
But that sense of pause and attention, I think, is to me what I've always valued so much about poetry, about art that asks me to get small. You know, and I love art on, you know, I love work that works on a large scale, especially, but the stuff that is really close to me is the stuff that asks me to see myself as the very small thing that I am in relation to the world, the universe, etc., to other people, to myself.
Right.
And yeah. So I wanted to back up for a second.
Yeah. Back up.
Maybe, and ask you a little bit. You know, I wanted to talk about how the dream deliveries or the Dreaming Denver happened, but it was very much like about COVID and the pandemic cautions requiring me to pivot as a writer and an artist. And I feel like you've been doing that as well.
Mm.
In your work, what changes have you had to do, or have you found yourself enacting with all the many things that have been, I don't know, happening?
Yeah. Well, you know, I would have predicted that I would want to keep away from screens as much as possible when I didn't absolutely have to be, through teaching and meeting with friends. I mean, this little portal that we all see before us is the place where we meet mainly. But I've not backed away. I've really leaned into it, my phone especially. But yes, I have, over the course of these, really just 2020 especially, I've been making these video poem films, and finding that I'm, an interest that probably began many, many years ago. I'm finding that I can write more. There's something about poems on the page lately for me, my own writing. I'm having a lot of trouble finding form. I feel really disconnected from how these poem ideas should sound. These poem ideas that are just in notes and notebooks, and how to give them shape. But there's something about video and image and moving image that feels right for the lyrics that I'm writing right now. And I don't know exactly how COVID really has shaped that, because there's something about the contactless connection of, let's say, your dreaming Denver, that I really love. I love that kind of intimacy that you speak of. And I don't know if these video poems are really more intimate. I mean, I suppose I can send a message out in the middle of the night, but there's something so, I'll wait.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm in the middle of an interview here. Sorry, Carolina.
No, that's okay. Who was that?
A friendly person who saw me sitting here and wanted to say hi.
I see. Okay. Saw you.
It was a very small town moment.
That's nice. Colorado represent.
Yeah.
But so there's something about the ways that I've been making what I'm calling these digital miniatures that are really like, I make them within 2 hours. I make them so that they're about a minute, and that's it. They are, I wouldn't say that they're for throwing away, but I don't labor over them for long. And I think that we're constantly holding these little devices, these little archives of pictures and screenshots. And I touch this so much. And that to me seems really like an intimate space.
Yeah. And I feel like there's been a shift from that sense of like, with some approaches to digital art and digital publishing, that sense of the computer or the screen being lacking intimacy or being cold, being distant as compared to analog. That as somebody who didn't grow up in technology or in this technology, like I felt for a long time that I don't feel as much anymore. But it is also like, I feel like you have to glitch the digital, or you have to trick the digital somehow and make it dumber sometimes, or make it sort of untie itself to get that intimacy out of it. When things are too perfect digitally, I often feel, maybe it's that uncanny valley thing or something, but I feel unwilling or unable to emotionally connect with it. That I want flaws.
Yes, yes.
I'd like to say that this is why I have this bad connection and bad technology for this interview.
Yes, right. Glitch the Digital is such a great title for something. I've written it down. Yeah, I've been paying attention to flaws for a long time now, but for these technical flaws, I think that they can be a source of really ripe ideas for work. I once had this weird thing happen with me and Patrick, my son, as you know him. We were typing in Google Translate. We were typing in words in English, random words like war, rose, water, rain, and finding out how to pronounce them in Arabic. And there's usually a little button you can press so that something speaks the word in Arabic. And then suddenly we refreshed the page, and all of the words in all of the times that they were spoken suddenly all came out at once, so that it was just a cacophony of all of these random nouns in Arabic speaking at once. So it happened twice, and then the third time we decided to record it and do something with it. And I'm always looking for moments like that, because they seem to me, or I want to make them more than just this little flaw, but maybe it is a weird space of, I don't know, ancestral transmission is how I want to think of it.
Yeah, it's like, how do we find the haunted elements of digital spaces, which whatever, how do we find the ghosts and the strangenesses and the surreality of this thing that when it's working as it is supposed to, should be clean, direct, and efficient. Which I think is especially funny with coming from a writing background, because the way language interfaces with the digital, I feel like, is very different than the way that the visual does. And I'm gonna back up to the Dreaming Denver thing. When the MCA first called me and proposed putting together a pandemic-friendly, I don't know, a COVID-era project, I had already had an idea in the past of having a walking tour of Denver, so I translated that into an audio tour. But what was exciting to me was that they had already thought about this with their own audio tour programs that they use for the museum. Mm-hmm. And for their audio tours, both inside the museum and also with the Dreaming Denver, you call a phone number and then there's a recording and you hold it up to your ear with that. And there's something about, like, of course people can use earbuds and all these other things, but there's something about like the physicality of holding the phone to the ear and, the screen getting a little sweaty and like the having to hold it close if a car drives by, these sort of senses where the digital and the physical get sort of mixed up there. That was really appealing to me. And I like that part of how the technology of the Dreaming Denver project ended up working out. That, like you were saying, the ideal situation of how the Dreaming Denver would work is somebody goes to a location, calls up the phone number that is on the website for the MCA, holds their phone to the ear, and stands there for 2 to 4 minutes while they listen to me telling them weird stuff about what they're looking at. And that sense of stopping, that sense of like allowing this whole digital platform and digital program to then guide you to looking at the real world in some kind of new, off, different way. I don't know, it felt the same kind of intimacy as doing the dream delivery service and leaving paper on people's doors, but a different kind of intimacy. Physical strangeness of having to stand there for 4 minutes, and that nobody is going to have the same experience because of past traffic winds, or if it's snowing or sunny, if the creek is dried, if whatever, that the physicality of the landscape and the physicality of the city is part of the meaning making, in addition to what I've written and the way that I've selected the locations. Which I think kind of babbled away from what we were talking about. I apologize.
No. There's also something about seeing what is there and seeing also what had been there. I'm speaking specifically about your dream. It's the second one on the tour. It is the Market Street Bridge. Well, first I'm wondering if you would read it with just a little bit of setup maybe about the building that was there on stilts.
Sorry, I'm calling it up on the MCA website right now.
Yeah.
To give a little bit of background, I chose 30 locations around Denver for the Dreaming Denver project. 12 of them are downtown and they work in a sort of loop that could be a walking tour. I think it's maybe 3-mile walk that starts at the MCA building, loops east, and then comes back and ends at Confluence Park. And I really think I had maybe 50 listed of possible places that I wanted to work toward. And didn't for whatever reason. And it was a mixture of places that were of historical iconography to the city, a couple of them, places that were of personal iconography to me that nobody else would probably care about in the ways that I care about, and places that I found either through rambling around the town or by researching history. You know, an ideal version of this project that was not made up during COVID and not produced in 1 month. I would have had time to do a lot more historical research, but I read a lot of the early newspapers that are online for the Denver area. And one of the things that really struck me very early on was that at the spot where the Market Street Bridge is, the Rocky Mountain News, the first newspaper in the Denver area, used to have their building there for a handful of years. And this was I'm forgetting the dates exactly, but it was somewhere in the early 1890s, I believe. And the idea of having a building built in the middle of the creek on which you're producing newspapers, I didn't care about what the actual logistics or if it was a hazard or whatever. I was just like, that's what I want. And I stopped researching right at that moment. I was like, that's where I needed it. And so I wrote this dream for that spot. So ideally you're standing on the bridge and you're looking at Cherry Creek as it's flowing down to Confluence Park. There's a building built on stilts in the middle of the creek. All night inside the building, newspaper people write and typeset and print newspapers. In these newspapers, they report the daily actions of every single person. They report not only the actions of sports stars and elected officials and people seen on screens, but the daily routines of children waking for school with noisy yawns, and people at cash registers scanning items and relating total prices to customers, and people staring at computers all day with dry eyes, and people hammering in the final nail of a raised garden bed and gazing on the wooden rectangle with pride, and people lining up for a meal, and people pushing themselves to do just 2 more, and then, after those 2, just 2 more, and people honking their horns, and people carrying ladders, and people crawling beneath floors to fix wiring, and people clicking send on an email they've been putting off for weeks, and people watching a small brown bird of indescribable delicacy tap its little beak into the grass, and people assembling a furniture with only confusing instructions to guide them, and people walking a small dog, and people walking a large dog, and people mowing a lawn in precise, perfect lines, and people wiping dust from a shelf and then bringing the friend foes of a lost family to that dustless shelf, and people folding towels, and people nodding their heads to the beat, and people giving another person the advice the other needs, advice only that one person can give, and people looking at themselves in the mirror and frowning, and people pointedly looking away, and people holding a loved one in a tight embrace, and people putting something into their bodies that will help them make it through the day, and people slicing bread, and people measuring rice with their finger, and people cutting potatoes into small, perfectly equally sized cubes. And the reporters report all of these events with equal gravity and wonder and detail and care. A person's story is a story, and every story is reported here. And now the papers are fresh off the printers, and the newspaper person walks through the creek wearing tall rubber boots and reaches up, arms extending further and further, and hands you the paper. The paper is warm. You can smell the ink. You read all these stories, some making you laugh, some making you cry, but most just letting you know what others' lives are like, what others do through their very few days in this world. And as you read them, the ink rises off the paper in puffs of smoke. The newspaper prints each story with fire. This is why they have built their building in the middle of the creek. These tiny flames of letters and words and sentences burn on the thin newsprint paper and try to tell what a life is, and then, after being read, go out. And so I wanted to touch with some of the Dreaming Denver locations on some of the history or some of the neighborhood kind of culture, some of the neighborhood aspects, but through the sort of mode of the surreal, rather than trying to, I'm not a historian, I'm not an urban planner, I don't know, I'm not intelligent enough to know how cities work, but to sort of try to give a chance to see the strangeness that is always there in these places. And some of that strangeness is historical, some of that strangeness is in the wiping out of history, some of it is just in, you know, the trash that collects along the gutter. I think the surrealism that I'm most sort of tapped into with the Dreaming Denver project is like Francis Ponge, who famously wrote many, many poems about soap, or just small household objects, in which he would look at so intensely and pay such incredible attention to, that the surreal of their actual existence gets expressed in his writing. And I think I was hoping with the Dreaming Denver project that it gives a sense of the strangeness that we must ignore to function in a city, and would allow anybody really to sort of stop and look at a bear or some building or a fenced-in lake, like Lake Marston down in the south part of Denver, and think about just how pure it is. No.
Yes, that's such a beautiful explanation of the way, well, of surrealism, and of how a poem can look at an object, or how a poet can look at an object through a poem and transform it into that extraordinary thing. Yes, that final image, what you just read, of the newsprint rising up and burning up into smoke. I mean, it seems surreal in the ways that ancient sacred text is so weird, the ways that things happen in them.
I think one problem with talking about surrealism is the surrealists, as in like the French movement in the early 20th century, and how limited their sort of mode of the surreal or the absurd or the strange was. You know, to me, I'm more interested in how fable and myth intertwine with sort of the strangeness of just being a creature, you know, and especially the sort of Hasidic myths or Hasidic fables that were collected by Martin Buber, and how those were a direct influence on Kafka's little short stories, and, you know, and this sort of sense of all of the ways to interpret the world that we have to exclude in order to function effectively, you know, in order to give everything a use value. You know, I'm interested in all the useless values, I think. And I think, you know, that sense of dream logic is just innate to being human, probably innate to being a creature. And it gets expressed in all these different ways, but it's a constant through all of the history of art, the history of folklore and connection between humans. You know, the impulse is always there. And it's easy for me to think about dream logic in relation to like one person, like you dream blank, and then tell them a little weird story. And harder to think about dream logic in relation to a city with Dreaming Denver, both because there's a lot of hubris to be like, oh, I have uncovered the dreams of the city. It's not the kind of attitude I approach art with. But also the various kinds of people that I would hope would be these, and standing in these spots with all of their backgrounds and all of their experiences that I can't have access to and I don't know how to tap into, and thinking about how to give any resident of Denver, anybody visiting, you know, a sense of some kind of dream being enacted in these places that would work. You know?
Right.
And I feel like, you know, like the culture of dreams changes between peoples too, you know, and like, I don't know. you had said something about the dream culture in your family, or dream.
Yes. Well, I grew up in a really superstitious house with, Cubans and their island myths. And dream was a space where one could receive messages from the dead, warnings and omens. If you dream with, let's say, suitcases or clothes or shoes, and these would be shoes you would find where no one is wearing them, they're empty. That signifies usually something terrible. I don't know exactly what, but it all results in death, which doesn't seem all that surprising to me.
I mean, that's pretty much how life works, right?
Right. But for a long time, I was very suspicious of it, of really believing and buying into these kinds of superstitions. But I do really pay attention to my dreams, and I get poems out of them. I receive words. Just the other day in my dream, Jeff, my husband, said to me, he was explaining something, and he said it in French. He said a word that means the folds of seeing war again, the folds of what it is to see war again in one's lifetime. So I've written that down. I don't know if I'm going to use it at all. But I do like the idea of receiving, of being a receptor. I think I want to know about your dream brain.
Oh, it's not interesting at all, actually. It's like almost all the dreams I remember are just really standard issue anxiety dreams. Like I'm a teacher and I don't know what I'm teaching, or it's, some event has been set up for me and I can't get there because I'm stuck in traffic, or it's all these like really uninspiring, unelucidating kind of anxiety dreams.
Do you dream on your bike? Do you dream moving through a city? Does the cityscape come up in your dreams?
It does. I mean, the biking through different cities, a lot of what I do when I'm writing the dream delivery service dreams is I'm just taking stuff every day and trying to take objects and nouns to employ into the dreams that I'm writing the next day. So I'm constantly sort of trying to be open to the landscape and be open to strange things that pop up, from famous buildings in the city to, in Seattle, I kept biking every day by this crushed, I think, D battery. And there was something really iconic and beautiful and awful about this, kind of outdated electronic technology, or like energy technology, that had been crushed under numerous truck tires and was now like slowly becoming part of the street. So crushed batteries and old batteries just kept coming up in dreams I was writing for people. And that sense of like being in the city at night when everything is closed gives the city its own sort of dreamlike quality.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm in the sleeping city, or the ghost version of the city, that I think connects with thinking about how I did the Dreaming Denver and trying to constellate different visual places, different kinds of places in Denver, which is, a very diverse city of landscapes, of peoples, of kinds of neighborhoods, and so trying to select a wide variety of what there is to be looking at in Denver, and then to build the dreams out of those spaces. It's sort of constellate was a verb that I think Sarah or Nora came up with when we were first talking about the dream delivery, or the Dreaming Denver, and it became sort of the way I thought about how all the 30 spots work.
Right.
That I don't expect anyone to ever go to all 30, that it's always sort of going to be a little bit beyond and a little bit too much. But that they might do the walking tour, or they might do a third of the walking tour and then 2 that are near their house, or that they might just kind of stumble onto these little spots one way or another.
Beautiful. This is the 12:45 mark, so we can let in other people. I don't know if anyone who's signed in has a question, but while we continue talking, there is, let's see. So Julie Phillips Brown asks, do you see this, Matthias? Matthias, how loosely, oh, sorry.
Oh.
Yeah, how loosely, let's see. How loosely do you use the term dream? Are they waking dreams, actual dreams, invented dreams? What of their relation to nightmare? Have your dreams changed over time? She wants to know, especially in the pandemic.
I guess I have a sort of limited idea of how I talk about dreams with the Dream Delivery Service and Dreaming Denver. And it's less about trying to recreate or envision the sort of chaos and everything of what happens in our minds when we dream, and more about the rhetoric of how we tell each other dreams. So that often, even if we have this immensely expansive kind of world building experience, that when we start to talk about it to somebody else, we say, well, I was in a house, but it was like my parents' house, but it was not that. It was also, a swamp, and this sort of way that with all of this like wildness that happens in dreams and inside the subconscious, we end up in this very banal kind of storytelling mode and very kind of simplistic. And so the dreams that I write for people tend to be in that mode. And that's what I did with the Dreaming Denver as well. So I don't have to tell people you're standing at this corner, because I've asked them to go to that corner and then listen to it. But they all start with a thing happening and a little bit of background. And then I'm both trying to guide them through looking at the things around them, and then also have them sort of move through things. So the nightmares, I write nightmares for people when they ask for them. In a sort of silly way, I charge $3.75 more for a month of nightmares than a month of dreams. Mostly, I did that just as a joke at first, but then as I started writing them, I realized that writing nightmares is a lot harder than writing dreams too, because writing dreams for people means that it's purely improvisatory and it's just about nextness. Whatever happens leads to the next thing. So if I'm in a I don't know, a ceramic studio, but I can dig down and find in the dirt of the ceramic studio ground a soccer ball, then I might next be playing soccer with The Rock.
The Rock.
And The Rock.
I love when The Rock appears out of nowhere.
The Rock is my go-to because I feel like for American pop culture, he is the most kind of Greek god archetype of anybody out there. And whatever his real world politics might be, he seems to, or presents this character of sort of pure enjoyment. But yeah, with nightmares, improvisatory thing, because everything has to come down to terror, horror, anxiety, fear. So it always has to sort of shift around. And then as a writer, in my sort of cockiness, I don't want to just have like a guy's chasing you with a knife, or like really obvious nightmares like that.
Right.
And obviously I didn't write any nightmares for the Dreaming Denver project, mostly because I wanted it to be a friendly experience.
Well, they really bring out your poet. I mean, you're such a poet of wonder, among other things, but they really, I think, hit those notes for me as a listener.
Oh, thanks.
Galina Gallardo, who is someone I know who grew up here in Denver, but is right now in El Paso. She asks, Mathias, yeah, you say you're interested in the uselessness of these dreams. I wonder if at this social moment where we are reconstructing society, do any of the dreams in Dreaming Denver have a social function?
Yes. I definitely wanted the dreams to point toward when they had a sort of social aspect to them. I wanted them to point toward a collectivity, a sense of mutual understanding and mutual aid, and a sense of a city being a place where, despite the exploitations that might go on in the city, a place for people to come together in union and come together in collaboration. So at the same time, I'm not an astute political thinker, and I did not want to try to use this as a chance to, or a space to sort of reiterate the political thinking of other people. So I was like still trying to, and I think this is part of what was really interesting for Dreaming Denver for me, was trying to find a public ethics of the surreal, where I didn't want to abandon the thing that is the thing I do. You know, like my mind works in the surreal, and that's sort of all I can do. But I wanted to use it as a place to envision the city as one of connection, envision the city as one of liberating potential. So without sort of reiterating just the narratives of some of the dreams, when typically the city is a social place, I wanted it to be a place of the things I love about cities, which is the chance for people to see each other, to connect with each other, to be able to join together, and for those things to happen.
Yeah, well, I wanted to...
I also hope, oh, sorry.
No, you go ahead.
I mean, I don't know, this might sound haughty or something, but I wanted to give a chance for people to have a slightly new way to use the city, you know, and so much of the way that successful contemporary cities like Denver work are in commerce, you know, and so I wanted to have this chance of using the city that doesn't need to rely on commerce.
Right. I wanted to tell Galina, as well as other people who might be tuning in from afar, that you could still call the number in the MCA website and listen to the dreams, listen to the recordings outside of the actual city, which is its own experience, especially if you're familiar with the city like Galina is.
And there's a little bit of where I went on the site as well.
I understand, yeah. But there's the Arapaho poem, the one on Arapaho, that is extension number 16, that is a kind of protest poem that envisions the city, the people, all speaking at once, the names of victims that have fallen to police violence, and how those shouts and echoes build a wave, a physical wave that can be climbed, and therefore all of those voices could build a new city, according to the poem, which I think is so powerful. And I just want to tell Galina to listen to that one, extension number 16.
Yeah, between the project being planned and writing it, George Floyd was murdered and the uprising happened, and I was in protests as often as I could, while also writing the dreams for this and trying to negotiate how to do the thing that I do as an artist and also be committed to the ideology and the dreams that I have on a political level of what I would want a city to do and what I want a country to look like.
Right.
So I also didn't want to be like the white guy bragging about having suddenly like discovered politics or something. I don't know. There's sort of an awful version of white guys writing about politics sometimes that, I don't know.
Right. Well, I think all the poems can be read through the same lens of the social, especially these that take place in these very public areas. So I think you really don't have to worry about that pressure.
Well, I think I have to worry. And I think that's good.
One last question. Julie Phillips has a follow-up. Julie Phillips Brown asks if it's ever reciprocal, that intimacy that you talk about. Do people ever write back to you? Do you ever appear in their dreams? That's so cool. That's a good question.
I don't
Do people
think
tell
I've
you?
ever written any. I mean, at this point, I think I've written something like 26,000 of these dreams, because I write at least 1,000 every time, and I think I just finished the 26th iteration in Hattiesburg. So I don't remember. It would be shocking if I've never shown up in any of them, but if I have, I don't recall it.
Well, do
do write back.
people? Yeah, they
love
do.
that. Some people leave me things over the course of the month, and it becomes this sort of conversation through the door. A really lovely writer, poet in Tucson, Arizona, left a piece of writing every day on her door as I was leaving one for
nice.
her. And, you know, that sense of, I don't know, the reciprocal was really beautiful. And like, but I also try not to, I don't know, I try not to have too much of like about the person too. I don't want it to be just like, and then your dog, whose name is Climax.
Entering in here.
Yeah. So I don't know what I'm saying here exactly, which is probably the best way I could ever stop any talking is to say, I don't really know what I'm saying.
No, that's great. I think I I think that you've had such a great influence on everyone here. You still feel like you're part of the Denver community of writers. And we always welcome when you come around. So so happy that you were here for so long in Denver, that MCA commissioned it, and that we have this gift of this walking tour.
And that is probably a perfect place for me to jump in and to thank Carolina. Thank you, Mathias. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you, everyone, from tuning in at home. And we wish you a great day. Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.